Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us online for tonight's celebration of our 2020 Margins Fellows joined by their mentors. My name is Jyoti Natarajan, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Margins at the Asian American Writers Workshop. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual event space. We'd love to ask you to please let us know in the chat where you're watching from. I am speaking to you all from Portland, Oregon, which is on traditional and unceded land of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, and Malala tribes, as well as many other diverse tribes who've made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. For those of you who are new to the Asian American Writers Workshop, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting Asian diasporic literature and storytelling. At a time when our communities are specifically vulnerable, we continue to offer a space in which we can imagine a more just future. You can visit us at AAWW.org or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, where the recording of this event will be posted. During the event, we ask that all audience members practice nonviolence in the chat. Comments that are racist, transphobic, homophobic, ableist, and or misogynist will be flagged, and the person will be removed from this event. Now on to our show tonight. The Margins Fellowship was first established in 2014 as part of the Asian American Writers Workshop's 30 years history and tradition of supporting emerging writers of color. A home for the next generation of Asian diasporic literature, the Margins Fellowship supports 4 emerging poets, fiction writers, and creative nonfiction writers each year through an innovative mix of mentorship, financial support, residency, publication, career guidance, and community. We are here tonight to celebrate the work of our extraordinary 2020 Margins Fellows, Lee Luan, Emperatriz Ung, Joseph Lee, and Sarah Thankam Mathews. Joining us in this celebration are 4 generous and talented writers who this past year stepped into the role of mentor: Wendy Xu, Carmen Maria Machado, Susan Choi, and Mitchell Jackson. So it goes without saying that this has been a really difficult year. And last March, when we had to pivot our programming and our fellowship programs to digital platforms, we weren't really sure where, what we were in for and how long we'd have to stay apart from one another. And overall, looking back at this past year, the generosity and compassion our fellows have extended to one another in this time has just been extraordinary to witness. We are in awe of these 4 writers and are just so proud of them. And we are also just so deeply grateful for the time our mentors have taken out of their busy lives to guide our fellows in shaping a career, life, and a community as a writer. I just want to thank a few folks before we begin. First, 2 of my colleagues, Yasmin Majid and Lily Philpott, who have worked closely with our fellows this past year. Also, a really big thanks to our funders of the Margins Fellowship, including the Jerome Foundation, Nathan Cummings, the Serdna Foundation, and our individual donors who collectively help make all of this possible. So thank you all. For our event tonight, we asked our mentors to read some of their work, and following their reading, the Margins Fellow that they were working with will then read, and we'll go back and forth like that, mentor, fellow, and you can look out for all of our writers' bios on screen. And so with that, we will begin. Welcome, and thank you again for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's nice to be together online, but together. I'm really happy to be part of this event today. This is in my years in New York, it's been an event that I actually look forward to every year. when I first moved to New York, actually, and I discovered Asian American Writers Workshop, it was something like a place, the community that really blew my mind. I grew up in Iowa, and then I was like schooled in Iowa and in rural Massachusetts. And so finding the community of Asian American Writers Workshop was really special to me. And so then discovering the Fellows Program and the making of these pairings every year, getting paired with somebody so amazing like Emily, was really meant a lot to me, means a lot to me now. So working with Emily actually has been for me such an important exercise in gratitude. It's just been this amazing opportunity to kind of reflect on, I don't know, what mentorship means and what we need, what we need and how we can help each other at different stages of writing, and also what it means to like sustain a connection through times like this. So when I met Emily, I was already her reader, which was such an amazing and happy surprise then to then get to work with her. So even today, as I'm offering these like gigantic congrats to her, I'm saying it as her reader, but now as kind of a student of her poetry. I've read so much of it. I think of myself as a student of her attention too, and the kind of attunement that she's modeled for me, that I've got to see over the past several months, to her craft, to her histories in poetry. She's a poet that to me is so sensitive to where and who she comes from, which is so valuable. I feel like for me, reading her work and reading the book that will be in the future, I feel like it's like time travel. I've gotten to see it and all of you haven't yet. I've been thinking a lot about, what it would have been like for me also as a young poet to come across something like that, or to come across work like Emily's earlier. I wonder what I would have learned about myself. I wonder what I would have felt permission to do or say or write, if I had read such bold and risky, these kind of formally innovative poems at a time where I think myself and lots of other young Asian American writers felt like we can't be writing that. That was not for us, right? That was for somebody else. So I just feel really grateful to have spent this time with her writing, and to have these conversations we've had where, again, Emily models for me like deep reading, deep thinking, this really kind of deep living through poems, and also an intuition about poems that to me is a real marvel. So I want to say in this space now, again, just a gigantic congratulations to her. And that I'm rooting for you. I'm anticipating you, which has been really exciting for me, right? There's all this stuff to come. And I want to say thank you for teaching me. And also thank you for your friendship. Sitting in the park with Emily has been some of the happiest moments of a really difficult year. So thank you and congrats. And hearing you read is a real privilege. So thank you. So for my reading today, I thought I would read a tiny bit from a long poem called A Sound Unlike a Bell. I feel like this is a poem that maybe is me thinking through a lot of the things that also I've been thinking through with Emily and also through her work. So maybe it felt appropriate. And so we'll see where that takes us. Maybe I'll finish with one other poem. So this is from A Sound Unlike a Bell. A wish list. You who have listed me first. You who follow. You who name me incorrectly. You who do nothing to find me. You and yours. You who would bring up the rear, your friends, your enemies, you who would mispronounce me, you especially saying nothing. Yesterday, all I managed to write was a note to myself that read, "What is this poem even about?" And unable to find the poem in question. In the 90s, my parents took what jobs they could get. With each paycheck, we felt our loneliness coming to an end. Pointless cut flowers began to appear next to the kitchen sink. Remember? I will accelerate into carefree adulthood now, I might have said. A body follows a mind to the edge, and then what? I need these parameters around my speech. They push on me sensually, and yet I am always still listening for you. I'm too sensitive to receive criticism for longer than moments at a time. Mom says I'm getting too fat, and this is the Chinese way. She says, look at your soft white hands. She says they're perfect. She says you are perfect. May you never shove them down firmly into the farmed earth and pull up a root vegetable. May you never flex them to delay atrophy. May you never sweat in an unbecoming way or see the past the way we remember. In my last life, I was a realist without the constitution for prose. Mom says I am so beautiful and overfed. Look at your smooth, pale cuticles and oval nail beds. There is only one lifetime of praise in me, and I have not abandoned nostalgia just yet. I said I would write for her in the new year and send the drafts home in lieu of money. Unable to find the note that makes me sing, the text repeats my body into another. Where is the song finally trained upon me, not among the neon signage of the street at night? This poem is not for you. I only promised to approach the opening and let my tenses slip generously wide. This is where I come to be alone with words. I belly up to the sentence, and I live to construct this house for the vocal dead. Can you imagine? We used to answer the phone to declare our unknowing. Hello, I do not speak English. Thank you. Who is it, you? And why are you calling? I echo out miles at a time, but not to you. Praxis. I had put down in writing my fear of the war. I too pined for pastoral description. The blue of the water was the blue of the world. Newness does not, for me, equal satisfaction. A finite number of concentric rings I push out into space. A tedious fabric moving through time without malice. An act of oration, rebellion, inventory, fantasy. The sound of the earth closing its one good eye over me. Imagine you reach out towards the margin's white hand. You do what your poems want and are clean. When you lay down your thorns, you will be done. You do not take up arms against anyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. And congrats again, Emily.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Really glad to all be together. First, I wanted to thank the workshop, of course, for their support through the Margins Fellowship, and especially to Jyoti, Yasmin, and Lily for really working tirelessly to make an otherwise disrupted fellowship year run really as robustly and smoothly as possible. And to Emperatriz and Joseph and Sarah for your friendship your insights, your good humor. And I really look forward to being with you all together soon. The fellowship felt like one of the few really grounding and consistent things in my life this year, and so I'm really grateful for the fellowship. And I feel really lucky to have Wendy as my mentor. It's been one of my favorite things about the fellowship. Wendy is one of those poets who I followed for probably the longest. When I was in college, before I even knew how to read a full-length poetry collection, I had found all of her poems I could on the internet and read them all. So it feels like a serendipitous dream to be paired with her, and even more serendipitous that we live in the same neighborhood a few blocks from one another, and that we could meet in the park, and even when it was wet and very cold, and just talk about poetry for hours. So thank you, Wendy. You've made me feel really articulated and seen, and your really generous readings and understanding of my poetry has really helped to grow an opening in my manuscript that I had otherwise grown quite wary of. So thank you. I'm going to read 3 poems from this work in progress manuscript. The first poem has a Mandarin Chinese title, and it translates roughly to reversible or returning text. Hui Wen. Let me tell you about the river, how it returns brutally. There was a time my friends skinny dipped in the river. I was jealous not to have been there. At the time, it burned to be seen naked, my darker nipples. How it returns brutally, the low image of my body in those months. I never curled onto the fire escape above the river, though I imagined it often, and it is now memory. There was a time I climbed down the back of the bridge and waded in the underbelly of the river's waterfall, which marks a hysterical happiness. The river. I once sampled its water for oxygen. Let me tell you about the shrill clarity of sadness and how it is reduced to a singular image. Let me tell you about the river in January. Let me tell you of its color at night. When the spring came, I watched the water swell high. This image, it made me sick. She's the only one who hears me sing. She's the only one who hears me sing. The only one who hears me singing, she. Only one who hears my song. One hears me sing. No, she's the only. Who, me, I'm my only. Hear me sing her only song. I sing, and there's my only hearing. Sing her to only. Sing me into hearing, I who is my only. Hearing why my onlys, she sings. Whose hearing ones to singing. One, the only one, only, my only, sing me. The she who sings, hearing all the way to one. She's singing. In it, I hear my one Lee. And this last poem takes and translates some language from photo captions in a photo album that my late paternal grandfather had. My grandfather returns to Yanzhou after the war. A long dirt road, lined with thin trees, blurred figure on a bike. 现在家乡的道路 now, 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 what? 50年后，我与二妹、三妹合影。Torn red paper on a wooden door. 家中仅存下的老屋 The only old house that's left of my home. A child in yellow in the courtyard. Everybody, navy blue. 家与合影 family group photo family 合影家与 group photo 家家家家家家 My grandfather in a suit and tie when he returned home. Thank you.
It has been a tremendous pleasure to work with Emperatriz this year. I am in awe of the way she marshals formal power and intellectual rigor in the service of emotional truths. Her project has activated my brain in ways I never expected. I find myself coming to my own work with renewed interest in digital media, nonlinearity, and writing from artifacts. What an incredible honor to have a chance to get to know her at this moment in her career. I can't wait to see what comes next. This is called Horror Story. It started so small. A mysteriously clogged drain, a crack in the bedroom window. We just moved into the place, but the drain had been working and the glass had been intact, and then one morning they both weren't. My wife tapped her fingernail lightly on the crack in the pane, and it sounded like something was knocking, asking to be let in. Then the spices went missing. The sea salt, the rosemary, even a custom poultry blend. Finally, the saffron, $40 worth, and I asked my wife if she'd been reorganizing the kitchen. She said she hadn't. A few days later, I found the soft, red threads sprinkled in each cup of my bra. I'd have gone to her and produced it as evidence, though evidence of what I was not certain. But she'd been out of town the night I'd shrugged the bra onto the floor before bed and was still gone when I picked it up the next day. I tried to gather the saffron, but it dissolved to dust beneath my fingers, coloring the tips a burnt orange that didn't wash off for days. We blamed the neighbors. We blamed the cat. We blamed each other, especially when I was in the bathroom and she was in the bedroom, and I heard her say, "Love, did you hear that sound in the basement? Can you investigate?" And she heard me say, "Darling, did you hear that sound in the attic? Will you go and see what it is?" And it was lucky that we crossed paths when we did in the hallway in between. Otherwise, who knows what would have been waiting for us in those respective cramped orifices of the house. But I only realized that later. At the time, we accused, and then agreed not to talk about it anymore. The strangeness fed our discontent. We'd already been aloof, tender, and now we were fluttering around in our own rafters and sensitive as infants. We'd been discussing counseling even before the clogged drain and the crack in the window, but who can take the time to see a counselor when your wife won't tell you why she's crying, and also an invisible presence is tapping icy splinters of Morse code into the palm of your left hand, as it did to mine that evening the power went out. After that, something moved around at night. It sounded like the cat, until the cat disappeared. Then the patting continued, looping our bed like a satellite, soft-pawed but no longer comforting. We lay there in the dark, asking each other questions. Do you remember when we met? Do you remember when you spilled that bottle of champagne all over the hotel bed in Reno? Do you remember that old woman we saw in the grocery store, the one carrying the baby doll? Do you remember when your cousin fell down the stairs at our 15th wedding anniversary party? Do you remember that time I was gently trying to nibble on your finger and I bit down so hard by accident? Whatever walked around us gurgled like a pot at low boil whenever we fell silent, so we talked until we were too tired to care. We went to sleep in pajamas and woke to find them neatly stacked at the foot of the bed. One morning, my wife had a blue ribbon tied around her ankle, to which was knotted a tiny silver bell. My hairbrush vanished and showed up in the toilet bowl. My wife's daily vitamins were replaced with 8-penny nails. On Tuesdays, the full-length mirror only showed us our reflections as we were as girls, her gawky, me fat, both awkward and years away from the revelation that led us to each other, to this house. I broke the mirror, not by accident. We did research at the library, at City Hall, at the local historical society. It turned out there had been a graveyard for criminals on the property where our home now stood. Also, a woman's lover had strangled her in the bedroom just before the beginning of the last century. Also, a man had hung himself in the attic during the Great Depression. Also, a teenage girl had been kidnapped and held in the basement for a year in the 70s before the kidnapper, who never bothered offering a ransom, sent pieces of her body to her family in sets of Russian nesting dolls and then burned what remained of her on the front lawn. We tracked down the tenants who'd lived there immediately before us. Their school-age son claimed the seam between the world of the living and the dead ran through the foyer. We called a priest who prayed in every room and tossed holy water at the wallpaper, but eyed us suspiciously from each doorway until he finally asked us if we were sisters. We called a psychic who moved around the house like she was bored until she opened the lid to the dryer, which caused her to snap up into the air like she was hanging from an invisible crucifix and recite something in a language we didn't recognize but which sounded unfathomably ancient. We set a Ouija board on the kitchen table, but before we could ask anything, the planchette shot through the air and buried itself in the drywall next to our heads. Last, we called a woman we'd heard about through word of mouth, who only went by the name Miss. Others swore up and down that she specialized in succeeding where others had failed, but she failed too, and when she left, she recommended we burn all of our possessions and move out. Stories like this don't have happy endings, she said, picking glass fragments out of her hair and waving smoking sage around her body as she departed. My wife and I had a fight about that too. She wanted to leave. I didn't. I can't handle this, she said. I just want to live my life. She blew her nose into a coffee filter because every tissue in the house had turned to ash. But our life is here now, I said. Also, we can't afford to break the lease. That was the biggest indignity. A landlord who rented us a haunted house for above market rent, and we didn't have the money to move. We left him a few voicemails about the matter, but aside from sending us a handyman who dredged up clumps of blonde hair and a sparrow bone branded with an unreadable symbol from the depths of a drain, he didn't seem particularly concerned with our plight. That final afternoon, I opened the bedroom door, and instead of seeing our bedroom, where my wife had been resting with the curtains pulled, I was looking into the boudoir of a young woman from a long ago century. She was sitting nude before a mirror, pinning up her hair, and did not seem to notice me. In the bed, beneath a gauzy canopy, a body was moving like it had just emerged from a long and languorous dream. A foot poked out from beneath the blanket, and the sole was gray with dirt. For the first time in months, it was not the interior that was full of threat. How long had it been since windows had kept the many dangers of the world away rather than held them in? But this room was safe, all swaddling and perfume and late summer, early morning quiet. The young woman smoothed her hands over her hair, tilted her chin upward, and tugged on her lip before letting it moistly snap back over her teeth. Then she crawled into the bed where her lover, another young woman with ruddy skin and a smile that carved trenches into her cheeks, sat up and stroked her face. They pulled close, and I heard them laugh, and their kiss was wet and tangible, like an oyster passed between them. I felt a tingle of tears. I slammed the door shut. When I opened it again, my wife was standing there, looking just woke and mournful. After that, we were alone, together.
Before the pandemic, when we all first gathered as the 2020 Margin Fellows cohort, Jyoti asked each of us to bring in a piece of writing by any writer that we found ourselves turning to or returning to. I came to our first gathering with an excerpt from Carmen's memoir, Dreamhouse is Proof. It's been an honor to meet Carmen and talk with her as I puzzle together my memoir. I want to thank Jyoti, Lily, Yasmin, and everyone at the Asian American Writers Workshop for supporting us, believing in our work and our stories. I've learned so much from Sarah, Joseph, and Emily. While 2020 was chaotic, I'm immensely grateful for this community and the compassion and generosity they have all brought into my life. During the fellowship, I've been working on my memoir that maps out my personal experience in the aftermath as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and victim as witness testifying in a criminal trial. For context, I'll be reading a passage from my memoir where the narrator looks to unpack the concept of monstrosity. Thank you, Darian, for giving me the courage to read this today. Content note for non-graphic mentions of childhood sexual abuse. What makes a monster? The man who sexually abused me told me he only has one working eye due to a retinal detachment when he was a kid. As a child, I didn't fully understand what that meant. He told me he woke up one morning when he was in elementary school, unable to clearly see out of his right eye. He had permanent loss of vision by the time they tried to do surgery. The man who sexually abused me also couldn't hear well out of one ear. As an adult, I can't remember which ear. Was he blind and hard of hearing all on the same side, or were two sides of his body at war with his senses? A right eye with loss of vision and a left ear with hearing loss? He'd get angry when I forgot which side he couldn't hear well from, like it was intentional mischief on my part as a kindergartner. When I was 5, my abuser mother and I sat for a family portrait. We all dressed up, and he asked the artist to fix his right eye in the final piece, an early form of retouching so both his eyes were open in the image, decades before smartphone app filters. He hung the portrait in the living room, over a fireplace we never used. The day he was arrested on charges of child abuse, people who recognized my father on the evening news and newspaper called to check in on me, curious if I was the female relative referenced in the coverage. It was 2008. I was 16, going on 17, having run away from home nearly 3 years before, and I could barely process the flood of information. The lack of widespread social media mostly protected my identity as a minor, but that week I came to understand journalism's sensationalism firsthand. A family friend offered sympathy through the phone, telling me he's a cyclops and he's going to get what he deserves. Cyclops, a one-eyed monster, she said. I never thought of him that way. To me, he was someone to obey, someone to not anger, someone to please, someone to make myself as small as possible around. The mugshot printed in the newspaper was saturated with a harsh yellow light. You wouldn't know that he only has one working eye from that image alone. You would have to have had to known him personally. In the photograph, his right eye appears closed, no retouching or beautifying, so unlike the family portrait that hung on our wall. The headlines that accompanied the mugshot were grotesque, but it wasn't his loss of vision or hearing that earned him a blog post entry on Dastardly Dads. It was his actions, his high-profile attorney, the scandal of it all. It's 2018. I'm 27, and I'm drawn to the books. Not the skull collection or the wet specimens or the pieces of Albert Einstein's brain, the Mutter Museum's most famous relic. I wind my way through the main exhibit and pause when I see the books. Old books with illustrations carefully arranged behind glass, all written in German and Italian and French. Imperfecta, artifacts from the Historical Medical Library and the Mutter Museum's collection, meant to introduce museum goers to the early modern concept of the monster. No one is really lingering by the books. People crowd around the soap lady or the plaster cast made from the bodies of conjoined twins. People try to stealthily snap photos of these abnormalities on display with their smartphones. They point, they shudder, they gawk. But I look at the books and I think about the external and internal abnormalities they document, how these European men of science attempted to make sense of the unknown. There, I learn about how disability was first associated with portents and omens before it became a spectacle. I look at the old books and wonder, how is it any different from the present moment, where abnormalities and mental illness are curses to some and a gold mine of entertainment for others? Spectacle, curiosity, monster. It's 2016. I'm 25 in a psychiatric unit. This is the first time I acknowledge I hear voices. My psychiatrist, my therapist, and my social worker work with me for weeks as I deny the diagnosis. Everything and anything I know about this diagnosis they've labeled me with comes from movies. And in the movies, all those characters are criminals or murderers, either possessed by demons or malingering. They're all evil. They're all monsters. Does that make me a monster too? It's 2010. I'm 19, taking anatomy and physiology at a local community college. The professor hands me a sheep's eye to dissect, and my lab partner looks revolted, so I offer to handle the dissection while she handles the report. I use scissors to cut away the eyelid with eyelashes, muscle, and fatty tissue. I take notes, record, observe. I take a razor to make an incision and pick up the scissors once more with shallow snipping all the way around the ball of the eye. I have two hemispheres of the sheep's eye in front of me. I take notes, record, observe. I pause at the next step. I'm to use forceps to peel the retina away from the choroid coat. The retina lines the back of the eye on the inside. To peel the retina away is simple. So thin, so fragile, I'm transfixed by the remnants of the retina, the choroid coat, the vitreous humor. A transparent, translucent, iridescent mixture. I take notes, record, observe. At Imperfecta, I'm rooted to the spot. All I can do is look at the books, look at their illustrations, look at the documents written by hand. There, my curiosity unfolds, an urgency to dive deeper into the implications of it all, the internal, the external. I want the manuscripts, the medical journals, all the first-hand accounts, questions swirl. I ask myself, what makes a monster? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Choi, and I'm going to read 5 minutes from a short story of mine called Flashlight. Louisa lay awake, staring into the dark. The ceiling showed itself in a narrow stripe of light, first sharp, like a blade, and then becoming softer and softer, which began at the door frame, where the door was very slightly cracked open. The door was cracked open because Louisa was afraid of the dark. She didn't used to be. Louisa opened the door every night once she knew that her mother was well out of earshot, once her mother, with maddening slowness, had made her retreat from the room, clumsily bumping her wheelchair into the doorframe until Louisa wanted to scream at her. When her mother was finally out in the hallway, she'd hesitate, one hand on the doorknob, the door almost but not fully shut. "Close it all the way, please," Louisa would say in a sharp, grown-up tone. The first time she'd said this, it was because she couldn't stand another second of her mother being there, peering in through the crack. She'd said it every subsequent night in the same way because she had realized that it was, without being a wrong thing to say, satisfyingly hurtful. After she said it, there would be another brief hesitation, which Louisa didn't mind because it showed that her mother was indeed satisfyingly hurt. Apparently, her mother would have liked Louisa to ask for a story or a kiss, as if Louisa were still 5 years old. Her mother never expressed this desire, but it was nakedly clear. Such naked wanting to be wanted made Louisa's mother even more repellent to Louisa than she generally was. The door would click into its frame heavily. It was the kind of solid American door that in the year she had lived somewhere else, Louisa had almost forgotten existed, a door meant for closing. Then Louisa would lie in the dark, her unsparing mind tracking her mother's wheelchair down the hall and imagining hidden trapdoors hinging open beneath it. Meanwhile, the dark, like a snake, slid onto her chest, organizing its weight into neatly stacked coils that might bury her, crush her, if she didn't leap out of bed just in time and, with deft skill, silently reopen the door. Louisa was a master at handling the knob. She wasn't clumsy like her mother or thoughtless like her aunt. No sound escaped as the light was admitted, the darkness destroyed. Back to bed to gaze up at the stripe. Tonight, though, sound was admitted as well. She couldn't make out the words, but she didn't need to. She knew they were talking about her. This morning, instead of going to school on time, she'd been taken by her aunt to a building downtown to be examined by a child psychologist. No one had used those words, child psychologist. They had called it an appointment to talk about her grade level, which, at least at the start, she'd believed. On moving here to Los Angeles, Louisa had been put into 4th grade when she should have been a 5th grader. She'd been halfway through 4th grade when she and her parents had left the U.S. for a year in Japan. And during their time there, she'd finished 4th grade, done all the workbooks and readings and tests that her parents had brought on the trip, and she'd finished the Japanese 4th grade as well. She had done 4th grade twice, in 2 countries, and now was being made to do it over again, had been held back, as if she had failed. The appointment had been in a brick office building with a half flight of stairs at the entrance, and as they climbed, her aunt had said, "This is why your mom couldn't come with us, because of these stairs. I called ahead to ask if there were stairs at the entrance, and sure enough, they told me there were. Your poor mama." "She's not sick," Louisa said. "What's that, honey?" Louisa was silent. I didn't hear you, honey. Now, Louisa could pretend she hadn't heard. This was effective. No one was ever listening closely. Even the people who especially claimed to be listening were not really listening. It was this way with the man at the appointment. "My name is Dr. Brickner," he said, making a show of bending down to shake her hand. He had already made a show of leaving her aunt in the waiting room, and another show of reassuring Louisa that her aunt would be right there waiting for her, as if Louisa were in any fear that her aunt might disappear. Louisa's aunt was like a bright light that Louisa couldn't turn off. On the nights when Louisa's mother wasn't up to it, it was her aunt who tucked Louisa into bed and then lingered too long in the doorway. Louisa's aunt broadcast her kind disposition by constantly tilting her head to one side, crinkling her eyes, and compressing her mouth as if to savor all the good-tasting mirth trapped inside. Sometimes, performing this face for Louisa, she added nostalgic comments about her 2 grown-up sons and how precious it was to be reminded of them by Louisa's novel presence in her home. Louisa doubted her aunt felt this way. Thank you. Hi, Sarah. I want to say a few words to you about working with you as your mentor, but it's really hard to say these words under the umbrella of that idea, because our conversations as they've unfolded so far have been so wonderful and so, I just have to say, like, nourishing and interesting and stimulating for me. It's really been my pleasure to talk to you and my privilege to talk to you. And, the idea of being a mentor, apart from being very honorable, is a little scary. And it definitely unleashed more than a small amount of imposter syndrome in me when the Asian American Writers Workshop approached me and asked me if I wanted to do this. I'm not going to say that finally meeting you as we've met, sadly only, over the phone, but hopefully it'll be in person soon, didn't kind of underscore my concerns about being a mentor, because I just thought, who am I to mentor this woman who's so accomplished, so smart, so insightful, obviously my peer and my colleague, and already, and not my mentee. But I didn't even really have time to have those thoughts, because so quickly as we started talking, it really did feel as if we were friends and colleagues, and that I had as much to gain and learn from our conversations as you could possibly have to gain and learn from me. I'm so honored to be able to work with you. I'm so honored to be able to talk to you. I have such huge admiration for you, what you've accomplished already in your life, in your community, the leadership that you've shown. Writing is just one of many things for you. I know that. And yet you're going to be one of the main forces in that world which for you is one of many worlds in which you are so adept and so passionate. And I'm excited to be along as some sort of companion, friend, guide, to the extent that I can guide you at all. I know you're going to be guiding me just as much. And thank you. Thanks, Sarah. I can't wait to actually, I hope it's not wrong to say in this context, but I'm really looking forward to having a drink, whether that be coffee or wine. Either way, I can't wait.
Hi, my name's Sarah Thankam Mathews, and for the past year, I was a Margins Fellow at the Asian American Writers Workshop. I'm going to read from a novel, the majority of which I wrote when I was a fellow, and which I very frankly don't think I would have been able to complete without the support and the real community and comradeship that came from being a part of this fellowship cohort. I feel a great deal of love and gratitude to all the different people who were part of that. I think that there's something remarkable about the Asian American Writers Workshop and the space it carves out for us, for the tremendous, multitudinous peoples and the artistry and the storytelling of those peoples that can live under the umbrella and moniker of being Asian American. My novel is titled All This Could Be Different. It's coming out from Viking in the summer of 2022. It's the story of a young woman who moves to Milwaukee and the friends and love that she finds along the way. It's a story of love and tenderness and buried shame and working under capitalism. I'm just going to read from its beginning. So, Chapter A. I would like to tell a story of a different time. I was 22, a teak switch of a girl. I had finished college. There were not many jobs. The economy had punctured like a tire. Obama had just won a second term. He said, jobs, healthcare, national healing. He said, Trayvon Martin could have been my son. I was moved by this, thought that sort of imaginative exercise bravery. I would listen to his speeches on NPR as I dressed for work. I had found a job. This marked me from my college friends. I was a consultant, or going to be. This despite my arty degree. A consultant in training, 3 toddlers hiding in a suit. A peculiar thing, to be a sellout but not feel like a sellout. What I felt when I thought about this was that I had been saved from drowning. My friends without jobs were living with their parents, working unpaid internships at noble nonprofits. I wish them well. My parents were 2 oceans away. I was glad they did not, for now, need me to send them money. They had before. My client was a baobab of a corporation, Fortune 500. They made car seats, heating units, pedometers, batteries. My boss demanded I wear pantyhose. You are a contractor, he told me. No benefits. Women who work for me wear makeup. That is how it is. My men wear suits. You must dress better than the clients, always. That is how they know we work for them. We get the client to their definition of success. People only want to hire a guy when they want to be him a little. Remember that. Wear makeup, just a little, nothing tardy. I listened dutifully. The pay was only okay. Billable contractors' wages, this despite the 60-hour weeks. I had to file self-employment taxes. My boss liked me. Early on, he called me his rock star. Only because I sweated competence, a hungry efficiency. Still, it was funny to me, since rock stars get on stage, perform, fuck many girls, wreck the hotel room. I, meanwhile, waxed my arms, stayed watchful on sidelines, never met a Gantt chart I didn't like. He had first offered me $20 an hour. His firm was tiny, only 9 people. I said, thank you, I'll think on it. I went to a good restaurant in my college town and drank a full glass of white wine in the middle of the afternoon. I called him back. I said, hello, Peter. I have another offer, but I want to work with you. Would you consider 30? In the space between the gin bottles, the mirrored bar showed me a soft-featured girl, skin the color of Hennessy, eyes vacant with fear. My boss said, like a god granting a boon, 25 an hour. You'll relocate to Milwaukee, where your client is. I will pay for your apartment. That sounds great, I said. May have added, I'm honored I get to work for you. All nonsense. Once I hung up, I punched the air and yelled. I remember the restaurant as deserted, but it may not have been. This is not a story about work or precarity. I'm trying late in the evening to say something about love, which for many of us is not separable from the other shit. I moved to Milwaukee, a rusted city where I had nobody, parents 2 oceans away. I lay on the sun-warmed wood floor of my paid-for apartment and decided that I would be a slut. Thank you.
My name is Mitchell Jackson, and I am mentoring Joseph Lee, and I'll be reading an excerpt from Survival Math. This is one of the survival files. It's a second-person narrative told to me by one of my family members. You're out one night at the weekend hot spot off too many straight shots to count, and therefore the kind of faded you swear. Manifold, you're funny when you hear a dude you don't know say blood to cap a sentence. Damn, I didn't know people were still gangbanging, you say, and search the nearest faces for mirth. But don't nobody smile nor laugh, and in fact, dude smacks you upside your dome as if your joke was his cue. In an instant, the two of you take to scrapping inside the club, while neighborhood dudes whose account could damage your rep bear witness. And you best him before being wrenched apart and bounced outside. He paces one way, you pace the other, and in the distance between you lies the tacit truth that the animosity is in no way squashed. The next day, your friend is hosting your brother's moving to New York barbecue fish fry, and you show up hours prior, dump a shoebox carrying your Uzi and 9mm on the living room table, and shout to the group of gathered men and God, I heard people was looking for me. Well, let them know I ain't hard to find. Somebody gon' die. In your mid-30s, you'll bust one shot near, but just near your father, inside of your crib, not to kill him, but to discourage him from discouraging you against prosecuting what might be your last ballistic beef. But on this day, you're in your late 20s, which in this case is plenty old enough to die. You stomp out of the house and slam yourself into a car driven by your ride to beyond good sense girlfriend. Your brother calls and cautions you against doing something you'll regret, and furthermore, against returning to the barbecue fish fry. Hours after his call, you flout your disinvitation, which is to say, you show up and stalk the yard with a waist-tucked 9mm bulging under your t-shirt and a scowl that ain't got no place near nothing festive. You see a dude who witnessed your scuffle the night before, a dude who's a friend of your new foe, and you flash your 9 and threaten him into the basement. You lay your pistol in plain view and seethe. Nigga, we can scrap right here, right now, you say. Nah, bro. I don't want no problems, he says, and warns your newest arch foe heard word of your whereabouts and is on his way to the barbecue fish fry for action. By now, almost everyone wants you to leave, including the father of the friend who's hosting, and it's the father's wish you decide to heed. Oh, the timing. You stomp out of the yard, peer down the street, and in the distance see your new arch foe among a circle of dudes. You pull your pistol from your waist, and men, women, and God's only begotten son be damned, march into the middle of the street. Once, you told a grade school teacher of your plan to become a hitman, and though you haven't considered that career choice in ages, today could be the day that delivers you to the threshold of that young hope. Before you shoot yourself into that fate, a girl you know from high school darts between you and your new foe. She calls your name, pleads, please don't, please. She announces your fast foe is her brother, appeals once more against gunplay, and you pause seeing an escape out of what a breath before felt destined. Oh, that's your brother, you say? And lower your pistol. The next week, you pull into the parking lot of the grocery store with your daughter in the passenger seat, and out of some place unseen, your foe pulls up beside you. Neither hand touches the wheel, and you bet blood on why they aren't in view in what one holds. Decisions, of which the most fool would be to reach for what's under your seat. Your daughter is a fifth grader, which is to say, in this instance, plenty old enough to die. You curl over her embrace, and when you don't hear a pistol bark, you raise your head and shake it. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. And look your foe eye to assassin black eye and mouth. Man, I don't want no problems. It's squashed. It's squashed. And he idles for what could be the rest of your and your firstborn's life. Joseph, congratulations. First of all, congratulations on being selected for this program. I can still remember, like I said, doing a similar program with the Center for Fiction, and it really is somewhat miraculous to me that I am in this position with you. I can say I've had, it's been such a treasure to read your work and to learn so much about your home and about the history of the natives, and to try to figure out problems with you. And I think that this is such important work that you're doing. I think that, down the line when this is finished, it's going to find an audience, and it's going to touch people. And I'm just so happy for whatever, fortunate and feel fortunate for whatever kind of role I can play in helping you get to the finish line. And, I just want to encourage you to stick with it, even when it feels like, it's not coming as fast as you want, or you haven't figured out all the structure that you want. I think that's the joy of this journey. And, having been on a few journeys myself, I can tell you that it's rewarding to hold the thing in your hand and to see all that hard work. And so I am thankful to the Asian American Writers Workshop for putting us together. I'm thankful to you for taking this so seriously and for teaching me while I'm supposed to be providing some kind of mentorship to you. Thanks.
First, I want to say thank you to Mitch for the kind message and the opportunity to work with you these past few months. It's been so great to learn from you and to talk through writing and everything with you. So thank you again, and I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversations. I also wanted to say thank you to everyone at the Asian American Writers Workshop, especially Lily, Yasmin, and Jyoti. This fellowship has been such an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful for it. Of course, I also want to thank Emily, Sarah, and Emperatriz for this year plus we've shared together. I just feel really lucky to have gone through this with you and to be able to get to know you all. So thank you. So I'm going to read from the beginning of this project about my tribe and my family on Martha's Vineyard. According to Wampanoag legend, Martha's Vineyard wasn't always an island. In search of a new homeland for his people, the giant Moshup wandered the Massachusetts coastline. As he began to tire, Moshup's big toe dragged in the sand, leaving a deep trench. Cold seawater rushed in and eventually grew to become the Vineyard Sound. And so Moshup's weary foot inadvertently created a new home for the Wampanoag people, the island we call Nopi, a still place among the currents. Over the long years of his rule, Moshup shaped other features of Nopi. To feed his people, Moshup waded out into the waters of the Atlantic to snatch whales from the depths. Back on shore, Moshup killed the whales by slamming them against the clay cliffs at the western tip of the island. Their blood stained the clay its distinctive red color. The Wampanoag people called this place Aquina, the land at the end. Although life on Nopi was good, Moshup sought to build a bridge back to the mainland so his people could trade with the mainlanders. While he tossed huge boulders into the sea, a giant crab snuck up and pinched his foot. Roaring in pain, Moshup hurled the crab far out to sea, forming the small island we call Nomans. The bridge remained unfinished. To this day, the rocky area known as Devil's Bridge is treacherous for boats. After a long, peaceful life, Moshup foresaw the arrival of a new people who would change Wampanoag life forever. Moshup offered to turn the Wampanoag into killer whales, and many accepted, preferring to live at sea rather than face the mysterious newcomers. Bidding farewell to those who remained, Moshup and his wife Squant walked into the southern dunes, never to be seen again. On foggy nights, Wampanoag say that Moshup is smoking his great pipe, still watching over us. Every summer, my tribe reenacts these stories, the legends of Moshup, for a paying audience of summer tourists. Those are some of my earliest memories of the tribe. My moccasin feet squelching through the damp dirt, the embarrassment of wearing a breechcloth, the familiar smell of citronella candles, and the echo of my cousin Adriana's narration in the summer night. As the performance moved towards its inevitable conclusion and the machine-made fog rolled in, I never wanted it to end, despite my mosquito bites and self-consciousness. Acting out the familiar scenes, I always imagined a different ending. A Nopi without the invaders Moshup foresaw. But once the performance was over, Moshup was gone again, the illusion was shattered, and we were all left to wonder if those whom Moshup turned into whales were better off. Today, we, the Wampanoag people, only own a small piece of the smallest town on the island home created for us, the island home Moshup created for us, what is now Martha's Vineyard. I grew up off-island, but spent every summer in Aquina at my grandparents' house. My brother and I spent those summers carrying home piles of books from the local library and catching snakes we found under rocks and logs. I can still remember the day my cousin Eddie caught a ring snake, the first I'd ever seen. We played stickball in our yard, salty and tan from a day at the beach. We rode our bikes up to the same cliffs Moshup had marked with whale blood, where there were then a half-dozen gift stores and restaurants owned by our cousins. My grandfather told us our house used to be part of the Underground Railroad, and I imagined the big stone in the yard was a secret marker, signifying a safe house. Our only worries were getting tularemia from the rabbit droppings we saw in our snake hunts, or slicing a finger on a sharp clamshell while digging for a steamer. That powerful sense of belonging I felt, however, was complicated by the unceasing nature of the invasion Moshup predicted. As his prophecy renewed itself every summer, we had to fight harder to hold on to our land. I now understand the impossible choice Moshup offered his people: to give up their home and live free as whales, or to stay and live with the burden of protecting our land forever. I was proud that we were there, still telling Moshup's story to, as I saw it, the descendants of the very people who tried to exterminate us. I blamed the tourists in the audience for driving Moshup away and changing Wampanoag life, just as he had predicted. But our story was not a story of the disappearing Indian. We had resisted, and we had survived. This is the story of what happened when that small piece of land, the only remnant of the home Moshup made for us, became some of the most valuable real estate in America. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you all. A round of virtual applause, please, in the chat for all of our brilliant and talented 2020 Margins Fellows and their amazing mentors for such a beautiful, beautiful night of readings. Thank you all for sharing your work with us tonight. And thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight for this reading. The event tonight was recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube channel and later on our podcast, AAWW Radio. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Get so excited and we get so scared, laughing at ourselves, thinking life's not fair. And this is how it feels. As we go on, we remember all the times we had together. And as our lives change from whatever, we will still be friends forever. So if we get the big jobs and we make the big money, when we look back now, will our jokes still be funny? Will we still remember everything we learned in school? Still be trying to break every single rule? Will little brainy Bobby be the stockbroker man? Can he ever find a job that won't interfere with the tan? I keep thinking that it's not goodbye. Keep on thinking it's our time to fly. And this is how it feels. As we go on, we remember all the times we had together. And as our lives change from whatever, we will still be friends forever. Friends forever. Will we think about tomorrow like we think about now? Can we survive it out there? Can we make it somehow? I guess I thought that this would never end. And suddenly it's like we're meant